For the next lesson, we are going to take a percentage and turn it into a proper fraction or a mixed number. So again, let me set up my board. And we start out with 3.5%. And we want to know here what fraction 3.5% is. And in order to do that, you basically are just going to set this up. You take your percentage and you're going to divide it by 100. So I'm going to take 3.5 and I'm going to divide it by 100. But before I go any further, sorry, my blackboard keeps locking up on me. So I have my 3.5 and I'm dividing it over 100. But before I go any further, I want to take 3.5 and I'd like to turn it into a whole number. And in order to do that, I have to multiply both my 3.5 and my 100 by 10. So I'm going to do that really quickly. Take my 3.5 times 10, which gives me 35. And my 100 times 10, which is going to give me 1,000. And I end up with 35 1,000ths. And I know that I can reduce that. I know that 5 will go into both of those numbers. So I'm going to reduce it, and I'm ultimately going to end up with 7 200ths. So 3.5% turned into a fraction is 7 200ths. And I did that by taking my 3.5 and setting up my equation by taking it and dividing it by 100. But first I wanted to start working with some better whole numbers. So I multiplied both by 10, got 35 over 1,000, and when I reduced that I got 7 200ths. Let's practice that a little bit. The next one that we're going to do is the percentage of taking the fraction percent of 3/4% and turning it into a regular fraction. So again, let's set this up by taking 3/4 and dividing that by 100. Now you might remember when we were working on fractions, whenever we came time to dividing fractions, what we basically did was take the second fraction, flip it over, and then multiply it across the board. So that's what we're going to do with these. We're actually going to flip this 100 over 1 and multiply. So we end up with 3/4 times 1/100th, and now we'll just multiply across. And we end up with 3 over 400. And that's actually our final answer. 3/400ths can't be reduced any further. So when we take 3/4 of a percent and we turn it into a fraction, we get 3/400ths. Here's another one. Let's take 0.125% or 125 100ths of a percent, and let's turn it into a fraction. So I'm going to set it up just like I have been. 0.125 divided by 100. But first I'd like to take this fraction or this decimal and turn it into more of a whole number. And so I'm going to multiply both of my numbers by 10. And when I do that, I actually end up with, let me do that actually, 0.125. And I get 1.25 over 1,000. And I know that I can actually divide that, so that would be my answer, but I know that I can reduce that a bit. I believe that 1.25, it does. 1.25 goes into 1,000 800 times. So I can reduce this to actually 1/800th. Just double check my work here. Yep, 800. So the percentage, 125th or 125th thousandths of a percent is actually 1/800th of is a fraction of 1/800th. And I did that by taking my number, setting up my equation to divide it by 100. But first I multiplied both numbers by 10 so I could get a bit of a whole number here. And then I was able to reduce that down to 1/800th. And let's just do one more while we're on the roll here. This one is 2 3/8. And we're going to, again, take 2 3/8% and see what simple fraction it is. Now, the first thing that we need to do is take this mixed number and turn it into an improper fraction. And as you might recall, how you do that is you take your denominator, you multiply it by your whole number, and then add your numerator. So I'm going to take 8 times 2, which is 16, and then I'm going to add my 3. So 16 plus 3 is 19. So I end up with 19/8. And I'm going to divide 19/8 by 100. That's how I set it up, but we know we're going to flip that, and we're actually going to end up multiplying across the board. So let's just do that. Let's just multiply across the board. We're going to have 19/800ths. And I believe that's our final answer. We can't reduce 19/800ths anymore. So we took 2 2/3%, and we take 2 2/3% and we turn it into a fraction. We end up with 19/800ths. We first took our mixed number and we turned it into an improper fraction. We did that by taking the denominator, multiplying it by the whole number, and adding the numerator. That gave us 19. We put our 19 over our 8, and we had 19/8. We set up our equation to divide that by 100, but we know we're going to actually flip this fraction over and end up multiplying. So we had 19/8 times 100, or 1/100ths, multiply straight across the board our numerators by our numerators and our denominators by our denominators, and ended up with 19/800ths. So that is how you take a percentage and you turn it into a fraction.